through first of all what I'm going to cover today. So this is meant to be a really quick session to help you. There is loads of material on our website which goes over the spoken language endorsement in more detail, but tonight I'm going to start after this agenda with what one thing did you want to find out today, because I suspect that some of you might just have a particular area that you want help with, which I could then try to resolve, and after that I'll just go through the main areas, give you an overview of how to do things. So without further ado, let me go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I did remember to do that as well. So first of all, the other really key point is that if your students are sitting GCSE English Language in summer 2019, then all your candidates need to have been assessed, graded, their grades uploaded onto Edexcel Online, and the sample sent off to your monitor by the 15th of May. So that's the parameters that we're working with. So this slide just shows you where you can find the more detailed information should your questions not be answered this afternoon. So the specification just goes through what you have to do, the rules about videoing, how to make up the sample, and how to label your video recordings on your memory stick. I have a question from one person which says, have we started? I can't hear anything. Could you just put your hand up to confirm that you can hear me? On screen, you can see where you can get everything. So the specification, I've posted a thing which says ready for summer 2019 submission. So that takes you through step by step how to upload your grades, how to mark your sample, how to find your monitor's name and address, etc. There's the admin support guide, which goes over the whole process and also answers frequently asked questions. We have 2 sets of video exemplars available, so students carrying out their spoken language endorsement and commentaries. There's a new set which I've linked to in the PowerPoint, which you might not have seen. Then there's the monitor's report from summer 2018. You'll need your assessment record sheets and your head of centre declarations. And then the video that I was just playing before we started is a 2-minute guide on how to do the spoken language endorsement. Okay. So I'm going to start now with just this question: what one thing did you want to find out today? So we're just before proceeding and sort of going through everything step by step. I just thought it'd be a good thing if we just say, first of all, what did you want to know? So if you came here tonight and wanted to get an overview, fine, no problem. But if you came and there's one particular area that you're hoping to find out about, could you type into the chat box now to the whole audience and say what it is that you were hoping to find out? So I'm going to answer these as they come up. So when you're recording, no, you don't need to show the audience. Your camera can be directed at the person who's being assessed, so the speaker, and you can keep the view on the speaker. I mean, if you've got another person recording, if you've got better facilities, then you can go for a kind of a side-on shot, maybe, where you've got the person who's speaking and the audience. If you go to the sample recordings that we have, you'll see that they do pan to the questioner and then back to the speaker. But that's obviously a kind of a more complicated filming approach, which is not absolutely necessary. Okay, so what happens if a student didn't complete the spoken language endorsement at school and refuses to do it at college? Well, this is it's a tricky area, but the spoken language endorsement is a required aspect of the qualification. It's a component part of 1ENO, and every student has to have the opportunity to do it, and the head of centre has to sign a declaration to confirm that they have had the opportunity. So if you've got students who are reluctant, it's good to make it clear to them why it's important to do it. So every student, or the vast majority of students leaving compulsory education in the UK, will have the ability to demonstrate that they can communicate orally. And so if they don't have that, then that's going to be a disadvantage. For some study routes, which are very communication oriented, it's necessary to demonstrate, it's an entry requirement to show that you do have speaking and listening skills. And so if a student didn't have the spoken language endorsement, then they might be asked to provide alternative evidence, which would be more difficult to obtain. That would be maybe sitting another English qualification. And then another thing that you can do is to obviously also make clear to them that if they don't do it, then they'll have not classified recorded on their GCSE certificate. And obviously the GCSE English language certificate is one that we have to show throughout our lives right until we retire. It never stops being an important document. And the other thing is to make clear to them, to talk to them about what it is exactly that they're worried about, and to try to find ways to combat that. So some students are afraid of speaking in front of a large audience, so you could assess them in a smaller context with maybe just yourself and one other student, for example. Some students really don't like the idea of being filmed. You don't have to film every student if you've got a large cohort. So with a really reluctant student, you might be able to not film them, for example. It's also worth having a discussion about what social media presence they've got if they're reluctant to be filmed, because many students, most people nowadays have a social media presence in film. So that might be also a kind of a useful avenue to explore. If at the end of the day you've done absolutely everything you can, you've spoken to the students' parents, you've done your utmost, then ultimately you can enter not classified for the student, and that is acceptable. Okay, coming to the next question now. Is it acceptable for the assessor to be shown in the video making notes? Yes, that's no problem. Some pupils are so fast that they really struggle to slow down even with the conversation. Their time is mostly 7 minutes. I wouldn't worry too much about 7 minutes. 10 minutes is not an absolute, you don't have to force students to speak until the 10-minute buzzer goes. 7 minutes is a reasonable length of time. Students can have as many goes at this as they like. You can show them the standardization videos to show them, to give them an insight into some of the pitfalls, or the strengths and weaknesses of different presentations, and that can be very illuminating for them. They can practice, in small groups. You could have the whole class practicing in small groups before they have a go. You can get students to pre-prepare questions, so you've got plenty of questions for the question and answer phase, so that that part is extended, for example. So one person just wants an overview of the recordings. I'm going to go through that, no problem. I have a question about whether it's possible to send one long recording. No, it isn't. So each individual student needs to be recorded as a separate entity, and the recording needs to be unedited, unless you are, you'll have to resave them. So in the specification, I'll show you that in a moment, but you need to save a file for each student with the required file name, which is listed in the specification. So I will go through that in a moment. So no, one long recording is not possible. So anxiety, students who suffer with anxiety. Well, as I mentioned before, it's really a question of sitting down with the student and talking about what is it that makes you anxious, and to think about how you can combat that. If you look at the video exemplars that we've got, there are quite a few different formats, and some of them are much less, I think they're likely to be less stressful for students who are anxious. So an interview approach is possible. So I would tend to maybe show that students who are anxious all the videos and talk to them about, what can we do to make it less scary for you. So another question, is less than 5 minutes acceptable? Not really, no. I think, 7 minutes is about the minimum. There are no fixed minimums and maximums, but the requirement is for 10 minutes with a presentation and questions and answers. So less than 5 minutes is 5 minutes or under is probably too short. Remember, you've got 2 whole years. You can do them as often as you like. And if you do a practice run and find that your students are too short, then that's, then you could demonstrate in class how to, for example, through the planning. So students plan their topic, don't they? So, let's say the topic was testing cosmetics on animals. So you could plan through the talk with them and show how more content could be added so that it was longer and more complex and more thoughtful if you're finding that your students are too short. Can a student with a not classified for spoken language endorsement still pass their GCSE English language? Yes, they can. Can students do a joint presentation? They can, but experience has shown that this is not necessarily the best approach. Certainly debates, for example, have not been found to be particularly good, because the idea is that it is an extended individual presentation, and with debates, students tend to bounce backwards and forwards and only make very short utterances. You could have students doing a joint presentation. They'd then need to wear name tapes, introduce themselves at the beginning of the recording. The screen, they'd need to be in shot all the time that they were speaking, and you'd need to make sure that that the whole presentation lasted 20 minutes then, because it's 2 students. And make sure that both students have an adequate period of demonstrating their ability to listen to and respond to questions. Okay. As people join, sometimes their microphones are on, so I'm just turning them off, but I think we're a quarter of the way in now, so it should be okay. Great. Well, that seemed to be, to cover quite a few things, so thanks for that. I'm going to carry on and just go through the main areas that I thought you would probably want to know about now. If there's anything during the evening or the afternoon that doesn't become clear, feel free to email me at teachingenglish@pearson.com and I will respond to you individually. But let's go through the other slides now. So how do you set it up? So if you're at the stage where you're just starting with all this, which some of you might be, the first step is just to think about, okay, how am I going to handle this? I've got X number of students, it's now just March. I doubt that anyone is only starting now for May the 15th, but they could be. But you might be at the beginning of a whole year or a beginning of a 2-year course. When are you going to do them? Are you going to assess all the students in class? Are they going to present one by one to the whole class? Are you going to take them off timetable? Are you going to make use of some other opportunity like in a PSHE lesson? So just think about what are the general parameters. You need to think about your approach to video recording. So if you've got more than 30 students, you will need to submit 30 video recordings, 10 each of pass, merit and distinction. So you need to think, what am I going to do? Am I going to video record all of the students or only some of them? If I'm in a large sort of 6th form entry school, am I going to record just one group and then backfill my sample, or what am I going to do? Then you should standardize teachers. So all the teachers in the department should watch the exemplar videos and commentaries and talk together to make sure that everybody understands what a pass, merit and distinction look like, and indeed what something below a pass looks like. You should teach students how to present and how to do the question and answer session. So of course, in all their different subjects, students generally do make presentations, but their abilities and their experience of presenting may vary quite widely. So it's good to, personally, I used to always do a presentation myself and get the students to assess me using sort of an observation grid, and to do things like comment on my body language, my eye contact, the tone of voice, whether I orally marked the movement between one topic and another, whether I signposted what I was saying clearly. And that can really help to sensitize them to the things that they need to think about when they're presenting themselves. And it's worth focusing on the question and answer section as well. So what's a good way to respond to a question? What about a sort of not particularly friendly worded question? Hopefully that won't happen, but what do you do if someone presents a really strong view and you're opposed to it? How do you answer politely? How do you cope with that? And in that sort of general sort of teaching mode, it's good to talk about, are students going to use PowerPoints or not? Are they going to use handheld notes? What are the pluses and minuses? If you are going to use a PowerPoint, how will you do it? Things like not turning your back to look at the PowerPoint, keeping your eyes on the audience and things like that. Then it's a question of choosing topics. So experience has shown that students generally perform best if they have the ability to choose the topic that they talk about, but you do also obviously may need to make them aware of what the assessment criteria are and make sure that the topics chosen have got adequate scope. Then students need the opportunity to kind of get ready, to have a run through, and then you'll be ready to assess them. So I've already covered this a bit, how to support reluctant candidates or those with additional needs. So think about who's in the audience. It could be that most students are presenting to the whole class. You can give certain students the opportunity to present in a smaller context with just 1 or 2 other students, or perhaps even just with the teacher. What about the format of the presentation? There are ways of making it less daunting. So look at the samples and pick an approach that the student finds least stressful. Are they going to be in the sample or not? If you don't have to put them in the sample, then don't, because then you won't have to video record them. And don't forget that students can have as many goes as they like. So If everything goes terribly wrong, it doesn't matter, they can have another go. That can take the pressure off for some students. Oh, sorry, I'm going backwards. Okay, so where to get the paperwork? I am going to go backwards now. So this presentation is already on the website. I'll show you where in a moment, but the links to all the paperwork that you need are on this slide here. So basically there are only 2 pieces of paperwork. There's the assessment record sheet. Sure where that's going to, actually I've already got that open, just a moment. Just move it over. There we go. That's taking rather a long time. Anyway, here are the links. This is the why is that taking such a long time? One moment. Here we go. So this is the assessment record sheet. So you can fill. This is available in Word, so you can fill it out in Word if you like, or a time-saving strategy would be to get the students to fill out the top bit prior to being assessed, and then as they are doing their presentation, you can listen and then make a distinction or make a decision about which level is appropriate, which criteria they've met, tick, 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 tick. And so that's one document. Okay, I'm not going to click on the others because that all was taking rather a long time and I don't want to waste your time. So the 2 pieces of paperwork are that sheet that we were looking at, the head of centre declaration, which your head teacher signs to say that everybody has had the opportunity to do the spoken language endorsement. And then the other piece of paperwork that there will be is when you've entered all your grades onto Edexcel Online and marked the candidates who are in the sample, you need to do a printout of that document that's got all the grades on for all your students and include that printout with your recordings USB that you send to your monitor so that the monitor can see the full range of grades that you've submitted and how the sample fits in with all of the grades. I have a question, which is, do you need copies of the PowerPoint slides notes submitted with the assessment record sheet? No, we don't. It's literally the assessment record sheet, the head of centre declaration, and the printout of grades. So that is all the paperwork that there is. So hopefully that doesn't sound too bad. Okay, so I've got a question about the sample. Let me go forward. Oh, sorry, I'm using different controls today. And it's here. So this is the slide which explains the sample. This is taken from the presentation. So if you have 30 candidates or fewer, then you submit recordings of all of your students. If you have 30 candidates or more, you submit 30 recordings, and they should be made up of 10 pass, 10 merit, and 10 distinction. And if you don't have 10 of each, the notes underneath, the A and the B, explains how to make up the sample if you don't have an equal distribution. I do hear from quite a few centres who say, well, I've got 30 distinctions, but I've only recorded 3. Is that okay? Can I just fill up the sample with other grades? No, it isn't. So that's something to bear in mind when you do decide on your recording strategy. You do need to have, if you're submitting 30 distinction grades, let's say, you do need to submit 10 recordings of distinction students. A couple more questions. So if you've got multiple sites, so if you're like an FE college, for example, with multiple sites, you'll be submitting a sample for each site. And I would recommend that you do send a head of declaration for each site, because each sample is treated separately. If you have 15 candidates, all the recordings will be submitted. One of you is querying the timings, saying I have submitted recordings under 5 minutes before and I was not sanctioned. I can't find anywhere where it says how long it needs to be. It's in the specification. That's where the length is described. Let me just see if I've got that open. I hoped to have it open. Let me just see. I will just pull it up for you. So apart from the fact that that 10 minutes is the requirement, there's obviously also the question of whether a candidate, whether you can make a good judgment on whether they've met they've demonstrated the skills in 5 minutes, for example. Let me just find spoken language. Here we go. Here we go, 10 minutes. In all cases, the presentation should be prepared and last no longer than 10 minutes. So it does say no longer than 10 minutes, so you shouldn't be encouraging students to go on for any longer than that. But as I said, if it's about 7 minutes with questions and answers, then that's probably fine. But I do think below 5 minutes is likely to be too short. Okay, so that is the sample. Just going over a few video recording issues, just things to think about. So it can be handy to get your candidates to wear a name tag, and they definitely need to wear name tags if there's more than one person being assessed at the same time. If you were doing some kind of a debate or with two people presenting together, they should say their name at the beginning of the presentation as well. This just all helps the monitor to match up the recording with the grade submitted. The speaker needs to be in shot. You need to think about background noise. The monitors have commented that in some submissions, the background noise is almost so bad that they can't hear the presentation. So it is your responsibility to check the recordings meet the requirements before you send them off. So if you were doing, recording a whole lot of students at the same time, it would be good to do one recording and check it before you proceed to make sure that you're not getting sounds picked up. If you use a sensitive microphone, it can be very difficult to get in a quiet enough place that the background noise is not picked up. Please do make sure that you save your recordings in multiple places and that not only one person has access to them. I do often hear from centres who say, oh, the IT technician who had the recordings has left, or his computer has died and now we can't find them. This is particularly important if you do your recordings early. Sometimes people do the presentations at the end of year 9 or at the beginning of year 10, and you then need to store them right up until May of the year that your students hit year 11. So I would recommend that you save in different places and that you check the recordings before you say, that's it, done and dusted, finished. because it has also happened that people make the recordings and then at the last minute when they go to the memory stick they find that there's something wrong with them, they're corrupted. So belt and braces approaches are important. If you wish to, you can encrypt your USB and send a password to open the USB in a separate envelope to your monitor. That is a possibility. A couple more questions have come through. Is it necessary for the audience to be in the video or just the pupil who's presenting? It's the most important thing is that the speaker is in shot at all times. If you have got a more sophisticated setup, you can pan around and catch the audience posing the questions and then pan back to the presenter. But if you're just using a mobile phone or something like that, then it's fine to keep the camera on the speaker, although the questions being posed should be audible, otherwise it's not possible for the monitor to make a judgment about whether the candidate is responding appropriately to the question. Do all the recordings need to be IV'd and lead IV'd? It's not the same process as with functional skills, for example. So you don't have lead internal verifiers for GCSE, but you should have some kind of internal process in place to make sure that that grades are being awarded consistently. So I said at the beginning, like when you do the setup of all this, all the teachers who are going to assess candidates need to see the standardisation video exemplars and the commentaries and to discuss how to award grades. And I mean, you can do that as a standardisation exercise if you wish, show the recordings and get everybody to grade the performances and then compare with the commentaries that the monitor actually made. And you know, particularly if you've got a large number of teachers awarding grades, then you should have some kind of process in place whereby you sample the recordings and the grades awarded and make sure that you're confident that the grades are being awarded consistently. Okay, entering marks and sending off your sample. So if you're the person who enters the marks, and this is different in all different schools and colleges, so in some schools and colleges it will be the teacher who enters them or the head of department, and sometimes it will be the exams officer. But in order to enter grades, you have to have coursework and portfolio ticked in your Edexcel online profile. So it's worth checking that you do have that access well before May the 15th if you're going to enter the grades. Otherwise, you'll be in a last-minute scramble to get your exams officer to upgrade your access at a time when Edexcel Online is being heavily used, which is not advisable. It can slow down a bit. In the admin support guide, which I gave you the link to on that early slide with all the documents, there's a step-by-step guide on how to enter your grades on Edexcel Online. And so basically you're entering a letter, so P, M or D or NC against each candidate, and then there's a tick box to say they're in the sample or not. So you're ticking off the 30 students, or if you've got fewer than 30, so one of you tonight said you've got 15, you'll just be ticking the sample box for every student. Then you print off the grades for the whole cohort, and then you send off, I've written coursework sheets there, sorry, it should say assessment record sheets. You send those off with the assessment record sheets just for the sample and your head of centre declaration with the USB stick to your monitor. We don't provide special envelopes for sending this sample off, so you just use any ordinary envelope that you have available. Here's just some information about resitting candidates. I'm kind of guessing that you don't have resitting candidates because there haven't been any questions about this so far. But if you have got candidates who are resitting and they've previously taken a 9-to-1 GCSE in English language, then they can carry forward their previous grade, pass, merit or distinction, but not classified. If they were not classified before, then they have to do it. You enter them by using the T option code. So if someone wants to carry forward a previous grade, they enter using 1ENOT, and you don't have to enter any other information. So if they sat with AQA or OCR, for example, you don't have to tell us that or tell us what grade they previously got. We'll source that information, and if we don't find it, we'd come back to you. You can't carry forward a spoken language result from any other qualification though, like an IGCSE or functional skills or a legacy A star to G GCSE. It's just on the 9-to-1s. And you should make sure that the student really has sat it before by seeing their certificate or their results slip, because if you enter them using the T code and then at the last minute it turns out that they don't have a grade, then you'll have to change the entry, and if that's after the amendment date, then you could be liable to amendment fees. So that's just a few resit. So private candidates and home educated candidates, can they be entered for the GCSE in English language? Yes, they can, but they do have to do the spoken language endorsement. So they have to find a centre, and they have to make sure that the centre will do the spoken language endorsement with them. And after the entry is made, we do a private candidate is identifiable on the entry, and we would check with the centre then that they are going to do the spoken language endorsement with the candidate. So just a question here about resitters. If they were not classified before, can they be not classified again? Do we need to keep a record of all attempts tried to engage the student in the spoken language endorsement if this then results in a not classified? Yeah, we can't prevent a student from failing. So if they have previously not passed and then they have another attempt and they don't meet the criteria, then you can enter them as not classified. We don't ask you to keep specific records, but I would advise you to do so, because obviously if we receive large numbers of not classified grades from a centre, then we do investigate that. We do come and do a support visit to sort of find out what's going on, why so many students are having getting a not classified grade. Okay, I think that's the end of what I was going to cover. So I hope that I've met your expectations with regard to going over the most important things. If you've got any other questions now, do feel free to ask away. If you need to get home, that is also fine. I've actually forgotten to attach the evaluation to this event, but if you'd like to give me any feedback, please feel free to contact me at teachingenglish@pearson.com.